Okay, so I I purposefully the title of the session I kept a little bit because everyone talk when we are in the finance domain. Our application is very heavy. We need something which can lift the heavy weight. So that's why I say that the Spring Boot is ready and it's in the production for heavy lifting as well. So don't worry, whatever may be the volumes or complexities that you will have, you will be able to solve those problems as well with the Spring Boot. Fair? Moving on. The first questions that comes in our mind is why we need something like Spring Boot, right? Why we want to use this first of all. Fair. So let's look at the challenges that we have in most of the projects in today's world, right? Every time when we have to start the new project, I think we have to write the same repetitive code again and again, right? How many of you remember writing the web.xml, right? And then creating those standard XML files, then writing the front controller, defining the front controller, and a lot of that stuff, right? Do you guys have the property files on your project? Yes? How do you manage? You have your own way of managing things and then you write a lot of code to make it work together with the different environments and all that stuff, right? Again. So it's again the same code that you write when you go for the next project. What we do generally? Exactly. We take from the previous project whatever we have done, we copy and we paste it. However, right? And that's all is the boilerplate code that we have to continuously repeat on every project. Right? That's one of the pain area. If it's the same thing that I have to do, somebody should do it, something about it, right? That some framework should give it available so that I don't have to write all that stuff. Now, second problem that comes in is that, okay, I have done all the setup, I have done all my coding. Now, how I go about deploying it? How I build my wars, jars? Where should I go and deploy this application, right? I think that's also a common problem. What we do again? End script, Maven script, copy from previous project, take it here, do all that, put it up, set up Jenkins, set up team, whatever is your CI tool, then do the same step in the udeploy and get it deployed, right? So again, those are again the boilerplate code that we have, right? Also, how many of us have faced the problem of dependency management? Which tool you are using for dependency management, like jars and all that? Maven. If people are using End, then they must be using IV, right? So all that is a key, right? Even though we have a Maven, how many times you have faced the problem, oh, this jar is not compatible with JDK 1.8. It doesn't work. Okay, now I have taken a one jar which requires log4j, SLF4j and all that, right? And then the other jar depends upon the another version of the log4j. My application is working on different version of the log4j. And then again I have in the problem of which jar to pick up. That works with most of the dependency jars in between, right? So the whole ecosystem is driven by jar compatibilities also, right? And the versions that mismatch happens and it doesn't work a lot of time. Fair? So I think these are the classical problems that we have whenever we have to start the new projects. Now, again another problem. Everything that I need is a configurable. Everyone wants everything to be configurable. So everything is configurable, but I have to define those configuration again and again, right? Again, it's sometimes you say, array, so much of configuration, I don't remember what is configured and what is not configured and where it is configured, right? Because there is no standard way of doing all that stuff, right? What we need is the default settings, default sensible settings that I don't need to configure. If I want to change, then I need to configure something different, right? And there are too many options in configuration also, right? Everyone does it a little bit differently and everyone does it in a different way. Again, the build and deployment, most of the time we take care of all the compatible dependencies manually ourselves. We leverage the IDE Fair? And then we think about how we'll run our application locally. How we'll run our application in the downstream environments, QAT, UAT and all that, right? So what do we need? We need a full stack framework. This is very common word or started when people started using Rails, which is on Ruby language, where they have given the full stack framework, which starts from even DB migration. It defines how you write your DB migration scripts till how you deploy your application. Everything is defined there. And the trend started with Rails. After that, everybody started following that trend. And then if you see Django in Python, Symfony in PHP, most of the languages have this already there. Is there anything that you remember it's there in Java world? There is one which is used mostly as a Java, but it's from Scala world, which is Play framework. Again, that is also full stack framework that can give you end-to-end everything. Now, Spring has the overall umbrella of covering all the aspects. However, it is not a full stack framework which you can use. So, the same guys who are from the Spring community started working on the project called Spring Boot. And they have done it very nicely. They have done it very nicely that it's better than all other competitors as well. We'll look into that how. Now, one of the problems with the full stack framework is that they are very heavy. If I have to take everything. So if I take Rails, then it will come with most of the stuff that you have, right? So they are very heavyweight in a way. They are very bloated applications. So when it starts, it does a lot of stuff, initialization and all that. They also don't provide the different ways of implementing. They have one way of doing things. But if I want to do some part differently, then those full stack framework has little bit of limitations as well. So these are the challenges with full stack frameworks also. Now, whatever they give, what you get is what you can use, right? There is no other options to change in the full stack. These are the challenges with the full stack frameworks as well. Now, let's look at the Spring Boot, which is a little bit different but full stack framework for us, right? Now, first it helps with reducing the boilerplate code. So we don't have to write every time web.xml or anything. We'll see how, right? Provides sensible default configuration with inbuilt default beans as well. It can run on embedded version of Tomcat, Jetty, Undertow application servers. It has a way of automated build and deployment that also we'll look into. It has a feature called actuator, which can help to get some production-like features, production support features like health checks, log files, thread dumps, and all that. We'll see that. It has very good support for even unit testing. We'll look into that as well. And the framework works with convention over configuration, which means that it will have the default way of getting things done for which you don't have to do anything. It will just work out of the box. However, if you want to change it, you will have a configuration to change. Fair? Now, where to get started? I think that's the question, right? शुरू कहाँ से करें भाई? So I think the one of the best part about Spring Boot is that it has a very good concept of starter POMs, which is where you start from. It's like you need some keys to start, right? So if you want to use anything in the Spring Boot application, what you need is the starter POMs. So you have to go and look out for, okay, I want to use MongoDB. I have to look out for starter POM of the MongoDB. Oh, I want to use web application. Then I have to look out for the starter POMs of the web application. Fair? So I think they have done very nicely. They say that we come with a very less lightweight, no heavy, no boilerplate. Now you start adding the starter forms and then automatically you will get the whole full stack framework. Fair? So that's what we have to start with. Spring Boot starters. Include only what you need. So plain vanilla is standalone application, no web framework, no Tomcat, nothing. If you want web, add web. If you want MongoDB, add MongoDB. If you want JPA, add JPA. We'll see into that. Provides default implementation. As soon as you add the starter forms, it will provide you the default implementations. Let's look at the working code. And what we'll do is like, this is most of the time this session is about coding, live coding. Okay. So what we'll do is like, we'll take one simple application, we'll build it with H2 database as a backend and a simple web service, RESTful web service. Just notice the time it takes to build that whole thing, right? We'll build one get API to get list of movies and one get API to get detail of movie. Fair? So let's start by creating the new project itself. Blank, right? There is no setup there. So I'm just creating a Maven project. So even that directory doesn't exist, right? Okay. Everyone understands Maven a little bit, right? There is nothing in the Maven file right now. Okay. Go to command prompt. Nothing there, right? Only the empty directories here. See? Fair? So let's start from, we have to first start with starter, right? We have to start our application. Fair? So what we'll do is like, we'll add the starter forms. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, I'll create project in this. Sorry. Doesn't matter. Wait a minute. I'm using the EAP version so that you can see the good support of IDE as well, right? Okay. There is nothing in the source. Yeah. Form.xml. We don't have anything here. So now what I have to do first thing is I have to take the parent. So this is classical Maven thing that you can have any parent project from which you inherit stuff, right? So I've just added a parent. Now we want to create a web service. So I'll start with adding the web starter, right? So I'll go and pick up the web starter. Fair? Nothing else. What I'll do next is I'll create a package. Fair? Now I'm creating one simple controller. So we'll start with simple hello world first so that guys know. So what I have to do is I have to declare this as a controller. Fair? Now if I want to write a hello world, I need to map some request and all that, right? I have to define that this is my URL which should hit this method and the class and all that. So for that there is annotation get mapping. So this is like we have what? Get, post, patch, delete, like that, right? So they have a handy methods annotation there. So I just say get mapping. What is the URL? I would say hello. Now I am returning the response body directly. So I have to say response body. These are mostly the Spring MVC features, right? These are not very specific to Spring Boot, but these are like Spring MVC features available there. So since I am returning the string, I have to say string. I'm done. I'm done with my controller written. Now the only thing that we have to do is like somewhere we have to start our application, right? So there is a provision. So we have to define our application class. On top of that, we have to say @Spring Boot application. This is how I say this is my Spring Boot application. And then I have to write one main method. This is like take this like as a little bit of starting point, right? I just pick up this. So in this method there is nothing, right? There is only Spring application.run application. This is my class that I want to run as a starting point. And I have defined this as a Spring Boot application. Fair? So now if I start, I'm done. Now how I'm going to start my application? Do we need WebSphere? Do we need WebLogic? No, will run on the one of the application servers given, right? So by default, Spring Boot runs application on Tomcat. I don't have to define. This is the default configuration. If I want to change to Jetty or Undertow, I have to again just do the POM settings. That's all. I can in the pom.xml I say starter Jetty and it will start application on Jetty. So now I have Maven installed, so I am just running Spring Boot run. Run is the goal. So if you notice, it will start my application in Tomcat container by default. I have not specified anything anywhere. See, it started my application. If you notice a little bit, it started Tomcat on port 8080, right? By default. That's how it works. Now let's go and see if this is working. Yep. How much line of code we wrote? Only this application class to start with, and then the actual code, controller code, right? There is nothing else in the code anywhere, right? There is no web.xml, there is no front controller, there is nothing. So that's the beauty of Spring Boot, that it takes care of all the boilerplate code that we have to write into starting the application. Fair? Let's get started and go a little bit further on this. So what I'll do is like I'll define a property file. Now, which is a common requirement for every application, right? So in Spring Boot, again, convention over configuration. Everything works out of convention. Sometimes people call this as a magic. Oh, ये कैसे चलता है ना? I don't know. But this is how it works in Spring Boot and Spring Framework. Fair? So it's very careful. This is very powerful but very dangerous. Once you got into problem, it will be nightmare to find out कि अभी ये where is the problem, right? So again, convention is I define my property file as application.properties and done. That's my property. So I say, let's say my name is my property, right? Or maybe I would say last name, and I say Parekh. Fair? Now this is my property that I have defined. I want to read this property. What should I do? This is again classical Spring thing, @value. And I have to say which property I want to read, right? Let's say last name. I just say private string last name plus last name. Fair? Let me just see if this works as it is. Now I have to give $ here to pick up that value. Because I'm reading that as a property file. So that's the again convention how you read the value from the property, right? So now this last name will be populated here from the property and it will be available on my UI, right? Now again I have to restart the application, right? Yeah? Yes, it is, right? Because it will not reload automatically, correct? Generally what we need also is it should reload automatically, right? How many times I'll stop servers, right? Because that's also a classical requirement of every developers. But I don't want to have this reload to happen in downstream environments, only in the local environment, correct? So again, what we need? Starter forms, right? Or something that we have to add in the pom.xml. Fair? So let's do that. So what I am doing is, so there is a dev tools, and when I say optional true, it will not get packaged with the installables that I'll use further downstream, right? It is just for the local running. Again, these are Maven features. This has nothing to do with the Spring Boot, but see the way they have integrated it so well so that you leverage most of the stuff very easily, right? So again, I'm going and doing pom.xml. We don't have anything yet, only the web. DevTools, done. I'm starting my application now. So what you will notice is one message there which will tell you that, okay, there is a live reload enabled for this application. Fair? So if you see here, live reload is enabled. Now, let's go and look at the UI. Hello. I got the Parekh at the end. Let's go and change the property, right? Change it to something else. Sorry, property. Changing to, again, writing Sunit Parekh. Fair? Now we have to, so when it will be trigger, when that live reload will trigger is when you compile that project, because when you are typing, it should not start. So the trigger point for live reload is you have to compile. So when I compile my project, you will notice that it started reloading. I have not done anything, right? As soon as there is a file change, it detects for the file change in the compiled output. As soon as you compile, it reloads. Done? See, the again convention is important here, right? What we didn't tell anything ki this is my property file, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to pick up and all that, right? We followed the convention again here. Now, let's say a lot of people say, oh, we need property different in every different environment, right? Obviously, the classical example is your database connections are different in every environment. Local environment, you are connecting to the local database. For your downstream environment, we are connecting to the other databases that we have, right? So what we need is some kind of property configuration, again, which are defined for the different environments. Now again here the convention. Okay, let's look at, so what I'll do is like, I'm creating another copy of this, hyphen, and my environment name. Let's say it's QA is my environment name, right? Here I'm saying Ashish Gaikwad. Fair? So these are two different properties. Oh, sorry. What I did a rename. I have to do a, right? So one is application.property, another one is application hyphen QA. The hyphen QA is my key part here, which is again a convention. I am changing here to Ashish. Okay. Now, how this property will be picked up? That's the question that we have, right? Now, this property that we pick up, or how Spring Boot knows which property file to pick up, is based on the Spring profile. How many of you know Spring profiles? Fair? So there is a concept in Spring framework classically, which is called Spring profiles. So whatever the Spring profile is, based on that, the property files are picked up. Now, how should I tell that which Spring profile when I am starting my application, right? So when I am doing Spring Boot run, so I am changing my profile, so clear again. So if you notice, I am passing the runtime argument to the Maven command, which will be available to the application, right? And I am saying my profile is QA profile. So if I start with this, it should pick up the QA properties, right? Now, again, they have very good info messages. So if you notice at the starting of the application itself, I want to know which profile it is running, right? And again, there is a profile active is QA. Generally, you can make multiple profile active. So if you read more about Spring profiles, you will learn how to do all that. You can pass in multiple profiles and you can play a lot of stuff with the Spring profile when you want to have a different behaviors in different environments. Fair? So it's with the QA now. What should be visible here? Wait. Oh. Thing went wrong. Started with QA profile. Application QA.properties. Okay, QA mein there is a Sunit. I have changed into Ashish. So I made a mistake there. So here I should write Ashish, and here there should be a Sunit, right? Now reload. So it's reloading. हाँ चल गया. Right? डेमो लाइव डेमो में यही प्रॉब्लम है. पोपट भी बहुत होता है. Okay, moving on. So now we know again convention here, right? Now convention is application is the name of the property file. If you follow that, all things are done. You don't have to worry, right? Now we have seen that there is a port also, right, which is running on 8080. I have too many applications. I want to change. I want to go to different port. How should I do that? Can anybody guess? Those who know, don't. Those who don't know, first time to Java, Spring Boot and all. What should be the easiest way that you can think of? Okay, that's one option. But I don't want to pass every time, for example. But I want to every time run on some port. Yes. So most of you are right there. It should be some configuration somewhere, right? And what is our configuration file? Application.property, right? It should be the easiest to do it there, right? So if I want to change the port, but how would I know that what property to use? There should be some way for me to know properties, right? What all properties available? So here the documentation helps, right? So I just search for Spring Boot properties. I know it is appendix A, so I'm just going directly there to just save time. Okay. Now this is the list of properties that we have in Spring Boot. Scroll खत्म ही नहीं हो रहा है. Right? So all this is configurable here. Now I want to search for port. Now there are a lot of port. So I'll say server.port or something, right? So this is here, server.port. Now it says embedded server configuration on top, right? They have very good documentation. You just have to follow how to go through it, right? And now all this is available. See this? These are all embedded server properties available. They have special properties for Tomcat as well. They have for under Tau, right? There are a lot of things that you could do. Fair? So what we want to pick up is server port. Run this on the different port. आशीष क्या पसंद? कौन सा नंबर? 99. It's in application.property. हाँ, अभी एक और जादू. Magic. We'll see another magic, right? Okay. Now, I'll stop this. I'm running this in a QA profile. Which port it will start? 8080, right? Let's see. So just pick up the QA profile. Started on? Why? I have not given that in the application QA.properties. We have learned our object-oriented skills so well, right? Inheritance. Why should I define the common things again and again? Why can't I have it in the property files? How many of us have the property file where we have to repeat the property even if there's the same values? Most of us, right? But this is very common, right? I should have thinking this is there since like Rails started. So most of the stuff that you see is inherited. Most of the projects inherited it from Rails, Ruby on Rails thing, and that's why these kind of things were implemented so nicely. Now I just have to change. I have 100 properties. Fine, no worry. But I have to change only which I want to have different in the different environment. Then what will happen? There will be only 10 properties which are different, right? And then you have to manage only that. So there is a inheritance between property files. There is if you read Spring Boot, you can change these properties via command line also. So when you are starting the Spring Boot, if you want to have a different value, you can specify as a JVM argument. That's top. Second is system configuration. Third is your profile property. Fourth is your application property. That's how the inheritance goes. So you have a lot of options to play with it. I'm spending more time on this property because I know this is a feature that everybody needs, right? I'm just trying to explain that. So I think, but we need to figure out by reading all this. We have to go and explore and find out what is the convention or what is the magic, right? If you don't know, then we'll not be able to leverage the framework 100%. By default, what we'll do is like, we'll copy this property there. Chal raha hai. Everything is working fine. But we don't need to, right? Okay. So property clear, right? I'm just stopping on that topic and moving on to our web services development. Fair? Now, to do the web service development, we need a database as well, right? So for what I'll do is like, for this session, I am not using any Oracle or anything. I'm just using one embedded database again, which is like H2 database. I don't know how many of you have heard, but I think let's just move on there, right? So what I'll do is like, again, if I want to add the Hibernate capability, what I need is the starter pop, right? So I have to start and give the feature that I need the JPA feature to be enabled. I want to use Hibernate. I want to use the H2 database. Fair? So I need these three things to be there. So here is my JPA, Hibernate, and for Hibernate, since I am using JDK Java 8, so there is a library that I have to add which says Java 8, so that it adds the support for local date and all that, right? So if I have a local date, then it will map to the database date and all that, right? So that's why Java 8. Okay. Now, the problem starts is that, okay, I got all this, but then who is going to create my database? How would I create my database? I need to have tables, right? In Hibernate or in any RDBMS database, I need to define my tables. So I need some kind of a migration ability, right? So I'm saying schema migration. So I have to, from zero, there is nothing. I have to migrate it to having the table, movies table in the database, right? And further like that. So I think there is a very good DB migration tool, which is Flyway DB, or I forgot, I'll remember the name. There is another one, Liquibase. So there are two very nice tools available in the market for database migrations. We don't have to manage all that. So what I'll do is like, I need a migration also. So I'll add the Flyway DB. Okay, I have to add the Flyway DB and H2, right? H2 database. I'm adding that to jars as well. Correct? So I got most of the dependencies sorted out. Now what I have to do is like, first I have to write the script to create the table, right? That's how we start with, right? So again, when I'm using Flyway DB, there is a magic or the convention, right? The convention is I have to store all my database migration scripts inside DB migration folder within the resources. Now here the script is, I'm creating a movie table with three fields, ID, name and date. Fine. Okay, now the question comes that, okay, when this script will run, right? And who will run this script. Fair? So by default, when we add FlyWayDB dependencies within pom.xml, Spring Boot knows that, oh, I have to enable the FlyWayDB functionality. And then it runs it automatically when you start your application. So we have not done anything. We have not coded. We just want to see that the tables is getting created or not, right? So what we'll do is like, we'll go outside. I'm not starting in QA profile anymore. I'm just doing the run, right? So observe the logs that are showing up there, right? Oh, is the folder created with the dot in it or not? I don't know. Okay, so now we have the right folders there. Okay. Now, if you notice, there is a FlyWayDB started, right? I have not written a single line of code. What I have done is like, I have given the pom.xml, and then Spring Boot automatically detects that there is a FlyWayDB dependency, so I have to run that. Fair? I say FlyWayDB database is, I'm using, it has picked up some database randomly, right? Because I have not given any properties as well. Then it has run the migration as well. So which is this table is created now, and then Hibernate started, right? So now all this has been picked up by default. Again, these are defined by Spring Boot. Fair? However, I don't want this to be like this. I want to name it my test database to be different, my local database to be different, and all that, right? Also, I want to tell Hibernate. So Hibernate also, when it starts, it creates schema automatically based on the models and all that you defined, right? So it will start kicking in all those features. I have to stop all that, right? So again, to do that, where should be the configuration? Application.properties, right? So I just have to look up where I have to go for that. This is the list, right? I'm not going through that now because time constraint. So what I'm picking up here is that I want my JPA Hibernate auto DDL to just validate, not to create anything. And then I want to see the SQLs also when it is executed, right? So I'll pick up this. I'll pick up this also. And I am putting it into my application.properties. We'll remove this. Fair? So I've put up here. I want to have another, after this. So this is the way I can connect to any database by default. So I have to give the database name here, URL, password, class name, which is H2 driver. Fair? I would say here just movie rental as my name of the database. Fair? So it should start the movie rental database when it is in the in-memory mode, right? It should create that database and then it should create that table in that database. Fine? Now there is one more feature with the H2 that comes in, which says that, oh, if I want to go and see what table is created and all, how would I go and see that, right? That the question that comes up in mind, right? So in H2 database, we have a property which is called as enable console. By default, so here also if you look at it, right, the default value is already specified. So it is false by default, correct? So I say this is H2 specific property, I say true. Fair? I am think by compilation it should restart the application here. Now if I go to, again I know the port there, right? I have to go to the H2/H2 console path, right? So if I go here, now this is the default, so it has loaded by default the movie DB, but I have to go and pick up this movie rental, right? User is user, password is password. Fair? Test connection, test successful. See, when it comes in red, you think it's wrong, right? What's the name of reset the password? See this? And then there is a movie table there, right? Fair? Now this is H2 database. Generally the H2 database is used most of the time for running the unit test. The way everybody uses this in-memory databases is, we don't want to run our unit test connecting to Oracle database and all that, because that might be a time consuming process. Right? It's not a problem also nowadays, but still. So in that case, people uses the H2 database as its local in-memory database for the running the unit test. So now I have this console. So all is fine so far. So Flyway DB is automatically configured and all that done. Hibernate started, all that, but I have not written any class yet to map and all that. What I'll do is, like, I'll just copy paste. I'll create a directory. Oh, I'll put everything in the one folder only. Let's go ahead. So I have this movie RDBMS class, which is just the entity table, all that stuff. So I am picking this up. Now remember, always keep your application file at the top level, because the components can starts where your application file is. So be careful to keep your application file at the outermost or the top level, because the components can start from there. Now I go and copy the okay, this is nothing but @entity, classical Hibernate stuff. Table is movies, name, all that stuff. Now I added this local date, which is the Java 1.8 feature, right? Scribbling that my it's just the ID error, don't worry too much. So I have this simple, right? I am storing the name and release date. My ID is auto generated. Fair? Now I want to write the repository class, right? Where I'll write all the queries and all that stuff, correct? How many of you know about the JPA? Okay, few people, right? So I think the classical JPA and all. On top of JPA, there is a Spring wrapper which provides you a lot of extra features. So we'll directly look into that, right? So because that's available by default through Spring Boot. Now, by default again, when we are writing all this query and everything, I just need to check the time. Okay, 1 hour, good. So when we are writing this query and all that, when we are dealing with the databases, how many times we see so much of boilerplate code, right? Save. Same thing, right? If you are using Hibernate, you have to write save. You have to write which is as good as insert or update, right? And then you have to do find one by ID, find by ID. This is classical requirement of any. What we do generally? We keep repeating, copy paste. Or if there are few smart people, they'll create one base class. In that base class, they'll create all these methods and all the repository class will inherit that. Fair? So, Spring has done for that, exactly that for us. So what I'll do is like, I'll create one repository class. Now I need to have some, so here there is a small difference. They say that you don't have to write any code, then why you want to create a class? Can we create an interface? Fair? So there should be some base class, correct? However, in the approach that they say that okay, you're not going to write any code, then why you need a class? Then they said that okay, just declare the interface. Okay, extends. I need a CRUD repository, right? It's like CRUD operations, right? Insert, update, delete kind of stuff. Now CRUD repository again annotated nicely with the generics. I have to specify which class. So I'll say movie RDBMS, which is my name, comma, it takes second parameter, which is what is the data type for primary key. Here in primary key is long. So I've given this, done. My all CRUD operations are available to me. Because this CRUD repository takes care of all the find one by ID. If you want to check exist by ID, you can do that. You can get the count, you can do delete, and you can do save, right? Which is Hibernate save, right? Okay, fine. I am just creating one sample class to load some data into the database. Or I could write a script also here. But generally script will not work because we don't want that script to be executed in production and all, right? But for temporary, I think we can do that. It's like just to show some data in the database, right? I need that. Where did I keep that script? So I have to write insert into movies. Fair. Right, say movie ID will be auto, right? So I don't have to specify that anyway. So second will be movie name, comma, release date, right? Values, Three Idiots, comma, 2009, 12, 09, something like that, right? Let's see if this executes, right? Or what we could do also is like take this to the console that we have here, correct? And put the query here. What else? Looks good. Single quote. Let's see. Why it says column name is required there? Here? All right. Okay. Right. Thank you. So I've inserted the record, right? I've kept this also here, so I'll copy this here. So it will run also every time, right? It's just the migration there. Now what I have to do is like, I have to go into the movie controller. I don't want the normal controller. I want the, since I'm building a RESTful APIs, I need a REST controller. Normal controller also works. There is not a major difference. Now, what I want is @get mapping, right? I want to say movies, correct? Public list of movie, correct? Movie RDBMS, sorry, that's our object, right? Now here I want to take the data from the repository class, right, that I have, which is movie repository. So I'm just removing this hello world now, it's not needed. @autowired movie repository done. I just want to say repository dot find all because all is there, return. That will say it has to be casted to this because it's a method with a T and all. I think it should have done that because I've given movie there, right? Sometime it isn't. Okay. So now all good. I haven't done anything, right? What I've done is like I've written a repository class, but it's just the interface there. Fair? And then actual mapping thing. And then controller hitting this API. Returning this list of movies. Fair? Let's just start. Yes. So I have to give the annotation repository here so that it creates a component. Thank you. Fair? So it's similar to @controller. I have to specify @repository. Then only it will inject into this here. Otherwise it will not inject. That's the problem, right? Now I compile. That required a type. Oh, I think it did not pick up that. So this is repository, and then controller is autowired repository here. So if you notice, all the migrations are applied, right? Again, FlyWayDB ran, the migrations are applied because every time I start, this is in-memory database. All the data is gone. So it's good that we have kept the insert script set. So there is a one record in the database there, right? And Hibernate started here. All that good. Now we go and hit the URL, which is localhost 8080/movies, correct? Done. The API is done. But now the problem is that I have my release date, which is in the local date format. And local date got translated into some weird output because it took some default and did the transformation of that data into JSON format, right? So generally the idea is that you use the views. So what we could do is like here, quickly. So generally don't expose your domain models directly on the RESTful APIs, right? Always have the views around it. I say views, movie view, summary view. Okay. It takes the constructor, it takes the movie, this. Well, I want to have the getter method, so what I'll do is like I'll copy from here the name, ID, and I'll make one change. Okay, but instead of local data, I want to return the string, right? Because generally that's what you return in the JSON response, right? So what I have to do is like I have to format this, right? So here I have to say these are nothing but a wrapper, but it controls the output that goes back to the RESTful services, right? So movie.getName, movie.get dot format dot string datetime formatter dot ISO date, for example, right? I have just taken one default format from there, correct? And here movie get ID. Now what I have to do is like in the controller, for all the objects that I received, I have to convert it into the other object. So I say stream dot map. I say movie summary view dot collect. So now I have to return the movie summary view, list of movie summary view, correct? So this is Java 8 syntax, lambda and all that used heavily to convert one object to another object and then returning it back to the UI, right? Compile, start my application. Perfect, right? So always use views in front of your models when you are defining your, so it might happen that if you don't want to expose certain data, you can control that through the view, right? All that naming and everything comes from the getter methods of your view in the JSON data, correct? All good. So I got the example working end to end for the RDBMS, right? Starting from database to the RESTful APIs that we have built. Now what I'll do is like keeping the time in mind, there are only 50 minutes left. We have to see a lot of other features, right? So now what I'll go is like I'll zoom through all the features that is there in the Spring Boot, right? And then again at the end, if time permits, we'll look into a little bit of detail, right? Okay, so now the main purpose of this repository class, right, is that you can now generally our queries are not simple like find one and all that, right? We need to have a different options, right? One option is I want to use the HQL, which is the Hibernate query language. So what you do is like you create your method like this, or just declare a method. There is a parameter there. On top of that, there is a query annotation which is provided by Spring Framework. When you use this query annotation, you can specify the whole HQL here. This HQL can be as big as you want. Generally, your repository class should only have that thing, right? It should not be anything else. What is the complex is your HQL. But then what you have to do is like when you get the result, you have to convert and all that should be done by Hibernate automatically because you have all the mappings defined there. Correct? Sometimes you say, no, HQL doesn't work. I need SQL. Then also you can say native query true as a parameter in the annotation and then specify the whole SQL here. So what I have done is like I want all the movies which are released in year 2016 or whatever year, right? But that database, it's a date, right? I want to use a function, right? Which is an Oracle function. So which is a year. So it takes out a year from the release date and then compares what has been passed, right? Again, see the beauty of the code that you are writing, right? No boilerplate code of converting objects, mapping objects and all that. It just works. Fair? I can write without query also. There is again a convention here. I can say find by name. And then I specify the parameter. It creates your query automatically for you. You don't have to even specify the query. However, your find by name, whatever you specify here in the name, should match with the field name here in the movie class. So if I want to do find by local date, I have to say find by local date. No, I have to say find by release date because the release date is the name, field name there, right? So there is a whole set of convention. You can do and or also by just giving the right name of the method and it will take care of creating query for you, which are the simple queries, right? So don't write even query, the simple queries. It will be written automatically by the Spring Framework, which is a Spring Framework wrapper on top of JPA. Fair? These features are not Spring Boot features, these are Spring JPA features. Fair? You have all these options available. Now always the question comes is how to do all this unit testing, right? Because that's the major challenging part that we all face in our day-to-day. What to do, how to get all that set up and all, right? So Spring has a feature directly available where you can write your query test. So if you want to write a test for your JDBC class, the repository classes, what you have to do is put the annotation on the top which says @JPA test. And then you can auto wire the test entity manager, which is available directly to you. Auto wire your actual repository class. Now what I have done is like I have inserted 2 records into database. I am actually executing the actual method on the repository class. Correct? And then asserting. So this is my setup. This is my execution and my assertion. These are common things. However, the important part is the data JPA test. If you want to do any JPA, want to write test for the repository classes and auto wiring the test entity manager. Now, if you notice, I have not specified any Hibernate, a session factory or entity manager or anything. It's all injected. It's all taken care automatically by Spring Boot, right? So based on, once you have added the JPA, it looks up for the properties that are defined. So here if you go, there is a property defined for the data source, right? If you write here Oracle connection also, it will do connection to Oracle. Because this is a JDBC, right? So it does and creates this Hibernate session factory, everything for you automatically. Now you have all the, if you want to set some default property differently, how many connections, how many, all that is available as a configuration options available on the Spring Boot properties list, right? I can go and look up for all the properties that are available for data source and then specific to Oracle, H2, like that, right? So this is the way you do the test for the, so now there is another test that I have written, find by name, like find by release year, the last one, right? Always remember that when you write test, every test should have its own data setup. Otherwise, if the orders are here and there, if one test updates the data, second test will not work fine and all that problem starts, right? So that's why I am inserting the same data every time. If you notice in each test, it is there, right? Now to run the test, I think it's simple. If I go to the command prompt, I move to the different project. If I do MVN test, all tests will run, right? Because this is again my one feature, nothing to do with Spring Boot and all, correct? Now, if I want to write controller level test, what are the options available with the Spring Boot? So I go here again. So for controller level test, I think I need to start a application, something, right? So I have to say Spring Boot test at the top, which says that I am writing a Spring Boot test, followed by I want to say that auto configure mock MVC. Again, this is another annotation. It gives me the mock MVC instance as auto wired, similar to the test entity manager that we had. Then I am saying repository just to delete and save the data for the time being, right? Because so that I insert the data directly into the database for my controller test. So what I am doing is I am inserting 2 movies here, and then this is the MVC comes into the picture where I want to make a call, right? I want to make a call, web service call. So I say perform get operation. So this is get. You have other options, get, post, put, delete, all options are available. What I am doing is I am calling this get API. Here, look at this, get API / movies, right? And then whatever is the outcome result, I am doing all the assertion. These all are the features available, right? Result action is again a class where you can get the result back, which is in the JSON format, and then you do all the assertion on top of it. So all your code of converting your view object to JSON, everything is tested, right? And this is kind of end-to-end test. I am inserting some data into the database, I am making a web service call, and then whatever is the response, I am verifying that response. Fair? Let's look at again, there is a lot of use case of using the MongoDB. There is a lot of use case of using the MongoDB as well, right? So MongoDB is a classical use case. So again, there is a starter POM to start with MongoDB. Again, all those features are available. I'll quickly show you the movie class that I have, which is a huge, right? So there are so many fields here, right? And then I have getters. I have written @ document and @ID as a annotations there to tell MongoDB. I have a repository which is a Mongo repository, similar to what we had CRUD repository. It provides all that method. Again, similar stuff. If I want to write anything, it just goes by convention. Exact naming convention, it will create queries for me. If I want to write my own query, I can specify in @query annotation. Fair? But the Mongo query looks a little bit different because it's a JSON data, right? I have two view here, Mongo movie summary view. So when I have the list, I am just exposing 3 fields. When I have a detail, I am exposing all the fields that I had, but then I convert them into some specific format. For release date, I am converting into ISO date. Duration field is a value which is a number in minutes. However, I want to convert it into hours and minutes and show it onto UI. So whatever I need to do, all the view specific things, you can directly put into the view. This is just the design pattern, right? It's nothing to do with Spring Boot or anything. MongoDB, for connecting to getting the MongoDB started, we have to add the MongoDB starter again. Starter data MongoDB. In this, you don't have to add anything else. In case of JPA, you need to specify whether you want to use Hibernate, which database driver you want to use and all that. In MongoDB, it takes care of adding all the dependencies along with that. To do the testing stuff, you have to add the starter test. Then only all that annotations that you have for testing will be available. Correct? Now, there is again a question. Okay, how to do the exception handling, right? In case of the if I don't find the object. So generally, there is a controller advice concept available in Spring MVC. This is not a Spring Boot, but this is the Spring MVC feature where you can define the controller advice and specify which exception needs to be handled how. So in this case, you will see I am giving the whole print stack trace back to the UI so that I can debug the application. In this case, I know that the object is not found, so I know exactly what to return in that case. And in case of controller, I have written a small code that if I don't find the movie object, I am returning the exception here. So automatically it will return the different status code and all that. So here I have specified what status code to be returned in which case, right? In one I'm specifying 404, in the other I am specifying 500. So this is how you can control the exception handling. So this code is available on the GitHub. You can look it up later also. I'm going a little bit fast here. Fair? So we have looked up at the unit testing as well, right? Let's look at quickly what is next. Right? So we have looked at RESTful web services. Good. We looked at the property files and the profiles, right? We looked at a little bit about the unit testing as well. All the support available. Fair? There are few links given here which you can refer for more details on the unit testing. Always remember when you are doing the unit test, arrange, act and assert. 3 A's of unit testing. Generally, a lot of time to get the coverage, we just do arrange and act and don't do the asserts right. If you don't do the asserts right, there is no value of writing unit tests. It just can get you the tick in the box. So just be careful there. Always follow 3 A's of unit testing. Working with database, we have looked at both the things, right? We have looked at the standard JPA stuff and we have looked at the MongoDB as well. Fair? Now let's look at the actuator, which is the Spring Boot feature. Fair? So to get this, what we have to do again, to get the actuator support, we have to add the Spring Boot actuator in the application. Fair? Now I'll show you the feature first and then you will realize why and what are the use case of this, right? So I'm just starting the application with the actuator added into the pom.xml. I have not done any extra coding or anything. It's just the dependency added there. So if you notice the logs itself, you will realize that there is a lot of new APIs are showing up here, which are endpoints, right? /health, /flyway, /dump, /bins, mappings, info, metrics, trace, heap dump and all that. So when you add actuator, you get few inbuilt functionality which are available there. So if I go and hit the URL with saying beans, then all the Spring beans that I have configured is available as a data for me to do any kind of debugging or anything. I can go and say I need a dump. This is thread dump. I got the whole thread dump of the application. If I say I need a heap dump, I have to say heap dump. I get the heap dump of the application downloaded. I think these are very handy when we have to debug the application in any environment. However, there is a catch here, right? For this, the application should be working. A lot of times we face into the problem where application is now no more in the working state. All this will not work, right? So there is a little bit of catch there. Now there is another very good feature which everybody needs is a log file, right? So I say log file. Oh, I have to first configure the log file in my property file. So where should I keep my log files, right? So what I'll do is I'll go to my application.properties. I'll specify the log file. Okay, let's just look up quickly on this, right? Log file. Logging that file. Fair? I just say movie.log. Fair? I reload. Logs are available. This is very useful, right? This is like very handy that we need always. Oh, log लेना है 15 मिनट तो log लाने को लगेगा जैसे कि अपन कहीं दूर से log लेके आ रहे hop करो, go to the server, log in, get the password generated and then do all that stuff, right? So I think this is available in Spring Boot or you can also develop on your own. That's very easy to develop, right? You just have to read the file and response back if you can create one endpoint. But these are very good features available in the actuator which can help you to debug application, right? So there are traces also. Trace. So you can get all the details about 5 or maybe 10 last requests that came to the server. What happened in that request? What were the header? What was the response? And all that. Right? So you get all the details about the last few requests. Now we have more, right? Health. Now if you notice, see the beauty of health check. So we have configured MongoDB. In this application both are configured actually. MongoDB as well as H2 database. What it does is like, it tells you whether I am able to connect to MongoDB or not. I am able to connect to H2 database or not. And returns you by default. So you can know if there is a database down by just hitting this URL, that whether the database is connected or not, right? Very easily. The another part of this health and metrics, so there is another one which is metrics. So it gives you all the details about what is the memory consumption, how many processors you have, what is the uptime, what is the heap used, all the details, threads available, most of the stuff. Another part is that you can write your own matrices and push into this also. So there is a very nice extension available where you can, if you want to push some matrices, let's say I want to monitor time, how much time this process or this method takes to execute, and then keep collecting, right? Generally we put into the logs, but then logs पे जा जाके then we have to collect all the data and then find average and all that, right? This guy can give you all that count, average, all that straight away with the just API endpoint. So if you follow that, it will work fine. Fair? So this is again the actuator starter or plugin available within the Spring Boot. We have looked at all the features, actuator, production support. Now the last bit remaining, how to build and deploy these applications, right? Because that's very critical, right? We talked about, okay, बाकी सब तो ठीक है, but how I can build this, right? Okay, let me go to the PPT first and make sure I go in that. So we looked at actuator production support. The log file dump is very useful features. So we have to look at two more, right? So secure development, right? So there are classical requirement of security on our applications, right? One is protect your passwords, right? How many of us have the password encrypted? All applications have password encrypted. How many have the password stored in the clear text? कोई हाथ ऊपर नहीं करेगा इसलिए मैंने पहले उल्टा क्वेश्चन पूछा Okay, fine, right? So those who have in text, this is a good thing that you can try this out on your project immediately. So we want our password to be saved in the encryption format, right? If we are putting it into the application or wherever we are keeping, so that people cannot know our database passwords and all. Fair? Now how to do that? Which libraries you guys are using for encrypting your passwords? Yes? Base 64 encoding. But then decoding also you are doing manually yourself then in the code. Okay. What are the other libraries available? Jaspith, right? I think everybody knows that's a classical standard library that everybody is using. Now, I'll first give you the quick demo of what is Jaspith, right? So now, okay. So in Jaspith, if I want to encrypt anything, I have to say what is my input, which I want to encrypt, and what is my encryption password. So I do this. I get the output, which is this. Now see the beauty of this. Every time you encrypt, it will give you the different output. Now I want to decrypt it. Then there is another command which says decrypt. Now if I put this output, right, G, which is actually a Jaspith feature. I am not talking about Spring Boot, but I think it does very nicely. So you can encrypt the keys and then your password is the key to decrypt it. Fair? This is the plot. So now if you want to use this, there is again first class support in the Spring Boot to give this encrypted passwords in your property file, and then it will automatically do the decryption and give you the value at runtime. So now let's look at this property here where I say this is my password name, this is my property which is encrypted, right? Now what we have to do is like we have to put the value inside ENC and bracket. That's again the convention. Whenever your property is having ENC inside the bracket, Spring Boot and Jasper will kick in and do the decryption at runtime automatically where you want to use the properties. All that will happen seamlessly without any issues. However, it needs the Jasper encryptor password. So generally for the demo I have kept it in the file, but generally we should not keep this because if we keep this then there is no use of it, right? दोनों वहीं पे रखा हुआ है तो कोई भी decrypt कर सकता है. So generally we don't have to keep this here. What we do is like, as I said initially, you can specify properties at the system level also and using the JVM arguments that you pass. So generally this decryption password to be given as a system property or JVM argument when you are starting your application. So that way it is taken care. Now nobody can take your passwords directly in the readable format. All good, right? However, for demo I am just keeping it here, right? So now when I want to use this property somewhere, I use it in a standard way. There is no difference when you are using it. It's just that when you are storing in the file, you have to put ENC bracket and the value which is encrypted there. And everything will work fine automatically. Again, to get this feature enabled, what we have to do? pom.xml, right? We just have to add the, so there is a Jasper Spring Boot starter. Now here if you notice, till now we were using all the starter poms and the dependencies which were provided by the Spring Boot. However, if you look at this one is by someone else, right? Some individual guy. So there are a lot of such starter poms available from third parties also. Also think of it that you can also write your own starter poms. So if you have something which is, you think that you need this in 10 projects. Now what you have to build? You don't have to build the libs. You have to build the starter libs. Right? Generally we build the libs, right? But now we have to add that starter lib into it so that when we are using it, a lot of configuration will come automatically. The beans will get initialized. Beans will get created automatically. I don't have to repeat that code again and again, right? So this is how you can write your own starter files as well, right? Just look at this code and you will be able to figure out how to do that. Just Google it, how to write your own Spring Boot starter. You will get the articles written around that, right? Now second classical requirement that we have is, I want my application to be running in HTTPS, right? This is like classical requirement and we put so much of head around, how to do this, how to do that, how to configure on WebSphere. When we are running this in Tomcat and all, we need that also, right? And there is a first class support again here. You don't have to write a single line of code, just property configuration and your application is running in the HTTPS mode. I'll show you. So first you have to get the certificate, right? That is important. Either you can do self-signed certificate or certificates for your servers. What you have to do is like you have to check it into your code base. Like this. Now I have to go and set the property. So first I have to set the property server.ssl enable true, which tells that okay, I need SSL. After that I have to specify all the details about my certificate. So there are a lot of different types of certificates. I also don't understand all of that, but I think you have to read a little bit and you will know exact property what to configure there, right? So these are the 4 properties that I have configured here. In my local environment, I don't want this. So I have not written any of this property in my local environment, right? I have given this property only in the QA environment. Further, I'll do it for UAT and prod as well, right? So this is again, I'm utilizing the Spring Boot properties feature, right? To not enable in some environment, to enable in some other environments, right? Now, if I start this application, it will start in the, if I start this application in the Spring Boot, the QA profile, it will start in the HTTPS. Let's look at that, right? Quickly. So I'm just starting in the QA profile, right? So even when it starts, it will give you all the information also, that it has started in this format or using this certificate and all that. So it started in HTTPS, right? Then it will tell you also what certificates it has used and everything. If you look at the logs, it will give you further details as well. Now, if I go and hit the URL, one second, hello world, right? Again, if you notice, there is a property here, right, which is in the encrypted format, and then there is a hello world. So hello/name, right? Hello/Sunit. Oh, it's not working because HTTP, right? Okay, because this certificate is not good. So now, these are the two classical use case. One is password encryption. Second is running into HTTPS. Fair? So I think there are more features. If there is a whole Spring security as a module itself in Spring, and then there are on top of, so most of the things, if you look at Spring Boot, right, Spring Boot doesn't have its own feature in a way. All the features are provided by the actual Spring modules. Spring Core, Spring MVC, Spring Security, Spring MongoDB data, Spring Data JPA and all that. What Spring Boot has done is that it gives you the default way of doing things on top of it. So you don't have to. Even the property file inheritance is not part of Spring Boot. Actually, it is part of Spring Core, where it provides all these features, right? What they have done is like they have bundled it together and they give you the default configuration in such a way that you don't have to write the boilerplate code every time. That's what they are doing. They are not doing or building anything. All the features that we have looked at, 80% of feature is Spring features. Spring different modules. Fair? So this is about the security thing. Again, quickly looking at the JMS is used quite heavily. So there is a Spring support and Spring Boot support as well on top of it for the Java messaging. So if I look at this, now again in the pom.xml, I have to specify what starter I want to use. Here I am using the ActiveMQ starter. There is a J. So you have to use the proper, means like either ActiveMQ, they have very good support for integration and all. However, you can use the JMS as well, standard. Now, for that, again, this is a simple application. I have written a consumer. Again, I just have to write JMS listener. That's all. But this is again a Spring JMS module features. Spring Boot is not doing anything. What Spring Boot is doing is that it provides you inbuilt MQ if you want to use within your application. So I have defined here that I will have my broker URL running on this. It starts my inbuilt as well, or I can connect to the outside as well. So I have a consumer listening to the sample.q. Fair? I have a producer. So if I send anything on the /send URL, it will post to this queue. Correct? So that's how. So if I want to do anything send to any JMS queue, I have to use the JMS template, and then simple convert and send will send the data to the queue directly. Fair? So this was the simple demo. This code is also available. So again, you can use for writing the test again. If you look at this test, I'm sending a mock MVC. I'm doing a post onto this, and then I'm consuming and verifying whether the message was available in the consumer side. So I've just written a dummy message store. So when I consume the message, I store it into message store, which is nothing but a hash map type. Fair? Next, 1 second. Okay, so we have looked at the secure development. Okay, let's look at the build and deployment, right? Which is a key. Now, by default, there should be some default convention, right? So by default, Spring Boot creates the executable jar, which has Tomcat embedded inside into it, or whatever option you have given, whether you have given Jetty or Undertow, based on that, it will embed that. Let's look at that. So now what I'll do is I'll just do mvn package, right? That's the standard command to package our application. Generally, another option is to package your application as a var also. But var, we need to deploy to the application server. Fair? So we'll look at the var is a standard way. So I'm not showing that. I'm showing the jar part of it, right? So I just say mvn package, and that's the default. So it will generate a jar, which is an executable jar, which I can run by java -jar command. Fair? So if I do ls target, ls -lv. So if you notice, there is a jar created, right? See this? If I do java -jar spring security sample sample icon. Oh, I'm not in that folder. Sorry. Okay. So now if I start, it will do exactly same when we executed Spring Boot run. Exactly same. Spring Boot run, you don't have to package every time when you want to start. It is a handy way to start on the local environment and all that, right? Now if you do mvn package, it will generate a jar for you. Fair? Now you have this jar which you can deploy anywhere. Deploy means copy anywhere, right? And just do java -jar, your application is running. You don't need any WebSphere, all that stuff, right? It is exactly the same. Now what we do is along with java -jar command, we give the profile as well. Now when you want to run in the different environment, if you specify your profile, Spring profile, it will connect to different databases and environment, right? QA, UAT, prod, like that. We have almost 4 such environments, most of us. One is dev, QA, UAT and prod. So I think you create 4 property files to have the different configurations, and the same jar that we have built can be used for running the application in any environment, right? It's not that I have to package it differently. What I have to do is I have to just pass the parameter differently. So there are classically 2 parameters that we pass. One is the profile and second one is Jaspit encryptor password, right? So there are 2 things that we have to pass. Fair? So once you pass that, your application will run. Now there is a first class support again to run this jar as a Linux service also. So you can deploy this jar as a Linux service, which can start, stop, restart, all that is available you as a service, right? How many of you have worked on Linux service? Little bit, starting, stopping services. Yeah, you will be able to relate, right? So you can deploy this. If you want to package it into RPM and go RPM route, you can do that as well. But what you have to package is like just the jar file, because that's your executable, right? And then package it into RPM so that it is deployed properly on the Linux packaging system, right? So that's how generally the build and deployment works in the Spring Boot. So all that is given. Generally, a lot of time we create a var and then we deploy the var using some mechanism there, right? Here also you can create a var. If you want, you just have to specify in the pom.xml what is your package, right? Here, this is again packaging, right? If I just say var, it will create var for me. Default is executable jars. That jar has everything. That jar has all the dependencies, including embedded Tomcat. You don't have to decide how to start my Tomcat, what I need to do, what property to pass, nothing. All that is taken care. So, but the jar is like heavy because it has everything inside. It might go up to 50 MB, 60 MB like that, right? So if I look at it right now also, it's like 16 MB. No. So I think the way the clustering or load balancing works is that we generally use either Nginx, Apache HTTP server. These are the three servers which are anyway doing the load balancing for us. Even when we are using the WAS ND, your load balancing is done by IBM HTTP server, not by WebSphere application server, right? So we have to have the load balancer anyway. So I could say that this has been deployed by me in almost like 3-4 projects. The Uno project is running very nicely right now. There is no issue at all. If you look at Tomcat and Jetty and all that, they are very lightweight. They consume less memory in a way, and they are proven in production on big projects. So Jetty got popular when the Google announced that we are using Jetty server in our production machines. So all these are used. Now you mean to say the annotation and all, right? So annotations are compile time things. Most of that are converted into byte codes anyway at the end. So they are byte codes. So JDK, annotations, all that, Java has taken care of the performance. So if you notice in JDK 7, the major improvement was related to reflections. JDK 8 again, Lambda, everything is proven that it works fine in production, no issues. We have applications running also. So now those days are gone when we used to think that using reflection is bad. Because that used to be in 1.4, I think, 1.3 or 4, long back. So those problems are solved nowadays. Because Hibernate is also using very heavily reflections, right? And you know that there are many applications deployed into production already using Hibernate. Right? High performing applications as well. What was the answer that I was giving before that? Load balancer. So either you use Nginx, standard Apache HTTP server, or IBM HTTP server. There is also another way that if you are using, I think SiteMinder also provides some sort of load balancing if you want to do. So you can deploy your application. However, the clustering, right? The second part is that do you want to deploy your application into cluster? If you are using sessions heavily, the HTTP sessions, then only you need that cluster to be defined. However, in most of the applications, the standard practice is not to use HTTP sessions, right? So if you are not using HTTP sessions, then you don't need a cluster to be defined. You can have all the same application running on 10 different servers. Let the load balancer send the request to the different servers. Even 3DNS, if you are using in front of your application, that can also do load balancing. There is another thing which is called as VIP, virtual IP. that also provides lot of time load balancing capability. Yeah, you were asking something.
Yeah. Have you ever tried integrating with any other third-party packaging which is not there right now in Spring Hyper? Have you tried that?
Can you give me the example? Third party means?
So, for example, let's say all the Spring data is used in our application also very heavily, but I mean just any hypothetical use cases that
Documentum. So we have a Documentum library that we are using. That we use in a standard way. We use that Documentum library and we add them into pom.xml and then we create beans ourselves for that. So for that I have to use the standard Spring way of doing things. So first whenever I want to use anything I find out, if I want to use Redis, let me see if there is a starter Redis. If it is there, then my half job is done, right? If not, then I have to do all that boilerplate coding myself. That is the difference there. Other than that, there is no difference. Yes. So then people are interested in to know what are the starter POMs available, right? By Spring. So these are the starter POMs available: Themeleaf, Starter Web Services, Couchbase, Mail. I think we are using Mail as well heavily. So it takes care of all the boilerplate coding there. Redis, Gemfire, ActiveMQ, Elasticsearch, JDBC, which is standard JDBC. A lot of. And which one? For Hibernate. It is a Hibernate feature, right? So you can enable by looking at property, right? Hibernate properties. Here if you go, look up whether you can enable or not, right? Like that. Hibernate properties are there. If there is a property or whatever you need to configure to enable it. I think by default it is enabled, right? No. Disabled.
So is there a starter form for JBoss or VSphere server if you want to use? Apart?
See, we cannot have starter POM for the WebSphere server. What you are using of WebSphere server is the application server, which comes afterwards. So you create a var and deploy your var there in a normal way that you do. You don't need starter POM for that. If it's an embedded server, then you need a starter POM, right? WebSphere doesn't come as an embedded server. A Tomcat, Jetty and Undertow. So only 3 are available in the market also, and they are supporting all 3. Yeah, I generally don't like that, but I can show. Yeah. So generally, this is all the starter POMs available there. Then there is the next question comes is that what are the dependencies, right? Okay, I am using MongoDB as a starter MongoDB, but what is the actual jar that is being used, right? What is the version of the MongoDB driver that is being used? That are sometimes important to know. I think if you notice, all that is taken care, but still I want to know. Then there are again, you can look up the Spring Boot. Again, they have all the documentation there. Dependencies. Okay, I have this URL here in the PPT actually. So dependencies can be found here. So all these versions are given, right? If you want to know which version. So based on what Spring Boot version you are using, they have already defined all the dependency that will be loaded. So if I want to know MongoDB driver, I say MongoDB driver is 322. If you think that you are not compatible with that, can't do anything. No, you can. You can override these dependencies in your pom.xml. You can say that I don't want to use 322, I want to use 320. Then you can specify that as well. As far as those are not totally vast difference in the versions, they work fine. Saying Ashish is suggesting there is a project which is called Spring IO, right? Start.spring.io. Now, when I want to start any project, right, I need that pom.xml to be added and all that stuff, right? And I need the source package and all that to be created, folders to be created. What the community has come up is that there is a page where you can say what I want is Maven project or Gradle project. I can say Maven project. Which version of Spring Boot I want to use? Let's say 1.4.1. I give my group ID, demo, whatever it is. I start searching. I want web. Okay. I want test. Testing. Over here. But these are the other. So you can select from here. If I want WebSocket support, I can say WebSocket. I can say I want caching, DevTools. I can select whatever I want, and at the end I can say generate. It will generate a zip file for me, which is actually all that boilerplate code again. The pom.xml created, and then all the folders and everything created, application.property created, all that stuff as well. So you can start from here also if you want, but generally I like to start blank and add what you want. Generally that's where your project will have, right? So generally you start with web, then dev tools. See, get to that step by step so that you know what you want to add. So tomorrow if you want to add JMS support, you can just go and add JMS directly into pom.xml. So this is another way of creating the base project. So going back to the PPT again, let's see if I have covered most of the stuff. Okay. So now there is a lot of material so I think the funda that I want to, the takeaway for me when I'm using Spring Boot is that you read more and you have to code less. You have to not code much. Now, if there are managers who judges you by number of lines you code, then you are screwed. Right? So there is a productivity tool which is coming up. How many of you have heard of Blue Optima? Right? That says that it will take your code and judge you how much you are coding in days. Then we are gone now. So I think the idea is that there is a lot of features and there are a lot of problems which are already solved. We just have to find out how to do it. And then you have to code very less to get that done. So in one of the classical example that I keep giving people is that we use WebSockets and we have a push notification because of the single page application, which is exactly similar to when you are on the Google page, you get an email, your email is directly loaded on the UI, right? You don't have to refresh your page, correct? Exactly same way, we have the alert inbox, and when you get the new alert, it gets loaded onto the UI directly. Now, before we started this journey of the whole Spring Boot and microservice architecture, the whole code was written which had like around 2,000 to 3,000 of lines of code. We started this journey moving. We looked at the Spring Boot support for WebSockets and all. We learned a little bit about Spring support for WebSockets and all. We finished all our coding in only 20 lines. Even that there are 5 lines of logs. That anytime there is a notification, we have the log. If anybody is interested, I can show you both the codes. Both the code, because that code is available in CSV because nobody deletes code, right? And this project was a totally new project. So what you are using is, we are using on top of WebSocket, we are using sock.js. Sock.js is another protocol which is used for pub/sub. So that got evolved as part of the message queue. So ActiveMQ also works on sock.js protocol in a way. So we leverage that feature and then we realize we don't have to do anything. The channels are created automatically as soon as anybody subscribes or anybody publishes to it. We just have to have one controller endpoint where somebody is sending the message, and then we have another line of code which says, okay, who all are subscribed to this queue, send them the message back. So I think that's how drastically you can see the advantage of using the standard way of solving the problem. Now another advantage of solving the problem in a standard way is that onboarding, right? You don't have to create your own documentation. I just say I am using RESTful APIs, I am using this design pattern, I am using this, all the features of the Spring Boot. You go and read Spring Boot, you are onboarded. I just have to have the design documentation around my internals if anything is there, but not a specific how I am making the connection or how I am using this WebSockets like that, right? So also if there is a bugs or anything, it is taken care by the community itself. Somebody will shout, somebody will fix. I just have to upgrade, right? So all that comes as a free, right? Whatever the problems. Or if there is a teething problem that we want to fix, we can give back to community, right? We go and fix in the Spring Boot projects or in the Spring framework because they accept pull requests from anyone in the world, right? So you fix that problem, give them that solution, then take the new version, you get it, right? So that's how a lot of people are giving back. Any questions? So I'm done with my most of the talk. Any questions, anything? So we looked at most of the features that you might be interested or you might be using on your projects. Fair? Thank you. Thank you for coming down and spending 2 hours. Thanks. पैसा लेता हूँ. I'll send the PPT, but I don't know who all are attending. So you ping me and I can send you the PPT. Or if you, it's very simple. If you go to the GitHub, in that there is a morning school project. This is the URL, that's all. You have all the projects here. The one that I showed right now is Spring Boot demo is here. So just GitHub morning school. So if you type, I don't know, if you type GitHub morning school, it should give you that URL. Yes. It's going to Sunit Pare. Yeah, this one, right? So it's that. So all the code is there directly here. Those who need PPT, just ping me on my IM and I'll send you the PPT. Fair? But there is nothing in the PPT actually. It's just I created that so that I remember that, okay, I have to do all this in the demo. Other than that, there is nothing there.